Welcome back to The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. And today I'm going to give you an in-depth review of the new pack from Exo, the K4. Now I've been running the prototype for some time and I just received a production version about a week ago. So I've got two different bags here and I can speak from fairly extensive experience with the prototype, and I've gone over the numerous and significant changes that they've made along the process that are now apparent in the final production version. Now, before we get into this, there's a couple notes I want to make. One, this is not a commercial for the K4. There's several things I'm not going to get into, like I'm not going to go over how to detach the pack and access the meat shelf. I'm not going to go over how to fit the frame to your body. I think Exo has done a phenomenal job in this generation, more so than any other previous generation, and 100% better than any other pack company that I can think of. There is a ridiculous amount of new, fresh videos on their YouTube detailing everything you could want to know about these packs. The different sizes, how to measure the hip belt, how to adjust the frames to fit your size, how to access the meat shelf, like all those things that you guys are going to ask me. Exo has knocked it out of the park. So my goal here today is to give you a qualitative kind of presentation of my actual lived experience with the pack. So I ran the prototype pack for 60 field days. I've taken it on 5 or 6 hunts now and multiple deep winter hunts. In fact, the last hunt that I took this on was an 8-day solo winter goat hunt where I loaded it up with 91 pounds, including my rifle, and was on snowshoes, hiked 6 miles in. I'm gonna go over all the details, but I want you to know that I beat the shit out of this prototype. Now, there have been a bunch of changes between the prototype and the final, and that's another reason why I'm not gonna waste a lot of time getting into specifics, because I haven't actually had the chance to use the final version in it. Like I haven't opened up the meat shelf in the final version, and there's a few things that I haven't had an opportunity to do yet because I just got the final version a week ago. In fact, they're not even opening sales until Tuesday the 28th, which is the exact same day that this video should drop. The other reason there's certain details I'm not going to go into is that I have done several backpack videos this year. So I have 2 videos where I compared 5 packs across 40 different categories. I will put the links right here. Now, in that video, I compared the Kuiu, Mystery Ranch, Kafaru, Stone Glacier, and the Exo K3. Now, in my scoring system, the K3 came out on top and turned out to be probably my favorite pack of 2022. Now, another thing I want to share is that in 2022, I ran 8 packs. So I don't want you to think that I'm some like Exo fanboy that only runs Exo. I ran a ton of packs last year. I paid cash for my K3. I paid cash for most of the other packs. Now, to be fair and to be transparent, Exo did give me these 2 packs. They gave me the prototype because after seeing my first review, they were just impressed at how much detail I went into, and they said, we would love to send you a prototype just to get your feedback. And that's another note that I want to get into. I had several meetings with Steve and texted back and forth with Mark consistently over the 4 or 5 months that I ran the prototype and gave consistent and constant feedback. And I can see where the things I said created change further down the line. Now, I'm not saying they changed it because I said it. They had something like 150 testers. And I think what likely happened is that some of the things I was experiencing with the prototype were very similar to some of the things that other people were experiencing with the prototype. And I'm sure they aggregated that feedback and the cream rose to the top, and whatever the best or the most common things were that they were getting feedback on, they changed. But I just want to give a nod to Exo because I've personally never heard of such an extensive beta testing process in the backpack industry. I can't think of another company that's put 150 of a pack out for almost a year in order to get as much real world feedback as possible before they finalized the production version. And that really says something about the design ethos. And this is one of the reasons why I've really come to like this pack, and I really come to like the Exo company in general. I think they're good people and they make really great stuff. I'm not saying it's the only great stuff. I'm not saying it's the best stuff. It's the stuff that I happen to like for my body and my hunting style right now. Now, to finish the thought I had earlier, on top of those 5 bags that were reviewed in those first 2 videos, I then did another video comparing a Seek Outside Goshawk and a Stone Glacier Terminus 7000, which you can also see right here. Now, if you take those 7 packs and put it together with this prototype, I ran 8 packs in 2022. Most of them paid cash for. So I really feel confident saying that I have a fairly good appraisal of what's available on the market right now for packs. Now, I don't have the exact same body type as everybody else. I don't hunt the exact same way as everybody else. So I can't say that I know what pack everyone else should be running. But I will tell you this, out of all the packs that I ran last year, this Exo K4 prototype was my favorite. I had 3 or 4 issues with the K3, and I feel like they fixed them all, or they made significant advances in those areas between the K3 and the K4. So if you're just looking for like the quick and dirty, what's my gut reaction? This is my favorite pack on the market right now. Let's get into some of the details about some of the changes that were made and some of the reasons why this is my favorite pack on the market right now. So here is the 5000. Now I've left the 5000 compressed so that you can get an idea of the size of the pack when it's fully compressed. Now, obviously, the 7200 is going to be slightly bigger than the 5000 when compressed, but surprisingly, not significantly, and there's not much of a weight discrepancy either. But the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is the new hip belt and lumbar pad system. Now, if you've watched any of my content, you know that I am a big fan of big, firm lumbar pads. I think for big guys with no asses, it's really the thing that's going to keep that pad supported on your hips instead of dragging down on your shoulders when you start getting over that 70-pound mark, which for a lot of us kind of deep backcountry guys, especially when you get into solo filming and all the rest of it, you're going to have packs north of 70 pounds on a regular basis. So what I want to draw your attention to first on the hip belt is the contouring and the actual foam itself. So I've been describing this as a more sophisticated hip belt. One of the issues I had with the K3 is that I found the hip belt rather blocky, and it was too tall in some places. So that if you crouched down really severely, or if you got on your hands and knees to crawl under windfall, I found it could kind of dig in above the hips. And because it was so wide, it almost didn't have enough pressure in some places to stay firm. So you would get a little bit of hip belt slippage. Now, they have significantly contoured the new design so that it gets much thinner towards the buckle in the middle. And the foam is firmer. So right out of the gate, I really like the new hip belt design. Now, the lumbar pad itself has actually changed between the prototype and the final production version. And I love the prototype, but I like the final version even better. So they were both made of the same material, but you can see it is much thicker and it's much blockier than the version that was on the K3. And the difference that they've made between the prototype and the production is that this kind of sticky material used to wrap all the way around the bottom, and they've changed to kind of have this fabric band go all the way around the outside now. And what that did is it actually created kind of more pressure at the bottom, and it keeps the foam up and it keeps it a little bit stiffer. This is one of my favorite things about the new pack. I love this lumbar pad. Now, probably the most important difference in the new system is the frame has been completely overhauled. So for those of you who are familiar with the K3, it was an aluminum U-shaped frame, and you could actually put these extension caps on the bottom and create a taller frame. if you needed to. So that has been completely changed in this new version. Now there are 2 vertical carbon fiber stays and 3 horizontal composite stays. And those are sewn in these fabric pockets, and together they create the rigidity and the structure of the frame itself. But because they're not actually physically attached, you still have some torsion and some flex so that the pack has the ability to move with you. I will be honest, I was a little skeptical when I got my first pack and saw it was carbon fiber. My experience with carbon fiber frames has been very poor. And I think that's because most carbon fiber frames on the market approach it from like a flat plate perspective. And they basically try and create like a one-dimensional flat piece that composes the entire frame, and then they strap everything to that. And I just don't think it's produced very good results. It's either too rigid or not rigid enough. It's too brittle. There's been just a lot of problems with that. But the way Exo has gone about this with the 2 carbon fiber vertical stays and the 3 horizontal composite stays, and allowing a little bit of wiggle room there in those fabric pockets, I think they knocked it out of the park. Like, it's one of the things you'll notice about this pack is that it's just as comfortable when it's extremely heavy as it is when it's somewhat lighter. Like, it's not one of those packs that feels great at 40 pounds and feels like garbage at 80 pounds. Now, everyone knew that when I ran the 6400 last year, one of my biggest complaints was size. I always want more room. And I recognize that's not a priority for everybody. I really like the fact that they redesigned their largest model to move from a 6400 to a 7200. And something else you should note is that doesn't account for the lid volume. So there's an additional 600 cubic inches in the lid. So you're gonna get 8,000 cubic inches altogether. That also doesn't account for the Nalgene holder volume or the pocket volume. So I don't think it would be outlandish to say you have an 8,000 cubic inch pack in the new largest version. Also, in the K3, there were only 3 belt sizes and 2 frame sizes. So in the new K4, you have 5 belt sizes: extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. You have 4 frame sizes going all the way up to 26.5 inches. And you have the 3 bag sizes that have all moved up a little bit, ending at the largest, which is 7,200, although functionally closer to 8,000. And finally, one of the other features that really stood out to me when I got it, they've moved to this laser cut MOLLE webbing on the hip belts and a few other key locations, and kind of pioneered this new attachment method that at first I was a little skeptical of, but the longer I use it, the more it's really standing out to me. So again, before we move on, let's have a quick look at some of the discrepancies between the 2 packs. So on my right, I have the K4 5000. So this is completely collapsed. That's as small as I get. Now on my left, I have the K4 7200. Now I've got a bunch of sleeping bags in here. This is about as fully as expanded. I could have run it up about another 10 or 12 inches here. Technically, you can run side straps down if you want to. I still prefer to roll and close, but the 7200 is still significantly larger than the 5000. But one thing to note is that no matter which system you are running of the 3, like which of the 3 bags or which of the frames you have, the meat shelf capacity is going to be the same on all of the systems. So if those are all the main upgrades, let's talk about some of the things that I liked. One of my issues with the K3 was the lack of locking buckles. I don't know how many of you have ever run a rifle up the side of your bag, or something really hard up the middle, like a pair of crampons or some snowshoes. And when you connect your 2 buckles and you go to tighten down the webbing, if the buckle and the webbing come to a 90-degree angle, you will lose friction in that strap, and basically the buckle will just come loose. And so for those rare instances, you need to have a locking buckle. And a locking buckle has an additional kind of pivoting mechanism that you have to apply pressure to in order to let the webbing slide back through. It's not purely friction. Now, What they have done is you get a couple locking buckles. I think it's 1 or 2 when you just buy a regular production pack. And then based on your style and where you tend to, clamp things down, you can move those locking buckles around as you need to, which I think is a solid approach because you don't need to have all the buckles on the bag be locking buckles. While this would add versatility, I think it would also add unnecessary weight. So while it's perfectly acceptable that you're just going to get the 1 or 2 that come with the pack, you can also order this kind of like a complete system. And for an extra couple bucks on the website, they will send you enough locking buckles that you could replace all the locking buckles on the new one if you wanted to. This was another major upgrade between the prototype and the final. They were testing out a different buckle system on the prototype, and that was one of my main pieces of feedback, especially once I got in some really cold weather hunts. The buckles that they had on the prototype system were simply too stiff. But having the final production version here now, I can see that they've gone back to their standard buckles, and I'm really happy. They're firm, but they're not so stiff that you can't open them with a pair of gloves on. Now, another thing that they've changed on the K4 that you can see better on the 7200 because it's fully expanded is that they have adapted, they've put new side pockets on the side that are different from the K4. And the way they have sewn them means that anything you put in the pocket takes up volume on the outside of the main bag. So it's not like it's a cylinder shape and anything you put in those outside pockets kind of digs into the bag and decreases your internal volume. They've kind of placed reinforcement at the bottom of those spotting scope pockets or tripod pockets, whatever you want to put in there, so that when you put material in there, they're forced out and it doesn't decrease the internal volume of the bag, which is a really nice feature in my opinion. Possibly my favorite addition to the K4, shockingly as it is the Nalgene holder. Now, some people are going to be asked, like, why do you even care? Or why is that a big deal? I'm a Nalgene guy from way back. I always preferred Nalgenes. I never worry about them leaking. However, because I like to carry pouches on my hip belt and because I like to use a gun bearer system sometimes, I was never able to put Nalgene pockets on my hip belts before because I would hit them with my hands or the kind of attachments on the hip belt were already taken up by other things. Now, what Exo has done is move that Nalgene holder to the back and put it on an angle. The genius of that is that they've kept it out of the way so I don't hit it with my hands when I'm walking, but because it's on an angle, even with my garbage shoulder flexibility, I can still reach behind and grab my Nalgene and drink while I'm hiking. Now, let me tell you why this is important, because the reason I switched to a bladder is that I hate stopping to take my pack off. So if I'm doing a 6, 7, 8 hour hike in, I don't want to stop unless I have to, like if it's lunch or we're gonna glass. And what that means is I get dehydrated because I don't stop to take my Nalgene out of my pack. So I switched to a bladder system because at least it would force me to drink while I walk, which was great, but it comes with all the drawbacks of bladder systems. You never trust them 100%. You can always leave a hose somewhat unconnected and drip water into your pack. Maybe you're gonna get a puncture. When your pack is full, trying to get that bladder in and out is a nightmare. Like, there's a bunch of things I don't like about bladders, but because hydration was so important to me, I just put up with it and moved to a bladder system. But now that Nalgene is right there, it's beautiful. And not only that, when you're on your way to camp, you can stop and get that last liter of water when you cross a creek and you don't even have to take your pack off. So yeah, unbelievable that it's one of my favorite things, but it really goes to show you that sometimes it's the little shit that really matters. But yeah, they absolutely knocked that out of the park. They also completely redesigned their hip belt pouches. This was another thing that I was not a big fan of on the K3. I thought they were a little small. I thought they were a little floppy. And the way they attached to the hip belt, it just wasn't my favorite. It felt a little janky. Now, to go in concert with the laser cut MOLLE webbing on the hip belt, they have this really, it's kind of non-intuitive. Like, you're gonna have to watch a video on it because you essentially take these straps and feed them through the MOLLE webbing on the hip belt and then feed them back through the slots on the back of the hip belt, and then it attaches incredibly strongly. Like, it doesn't budge an inch. And I've never had, they're a little finicky to get on, and it takes a second to get everything situated just correctly. But once you have everything locked in, it doesn't budge an inch. I'm a really big fan. Love the new hip belts. Love the Nalgene holder. Lid size has increased, and I also really like the contouring of the lidding. Some other lids, I kind of feel like this bulky thing that just sits on top of your pack, whereas I feel because they've kind of constrained the like the pocket of the lid itself, it's not too big, and then they kind of have a skirt that comes out from that pocket that wraps down over the lid. When you crank down those front and back straps, it really compresses the pack, sucks it to the frame, and you get this like really tight package that feels very safe and secure on your back. So functionally, what does that look like? And what's kind of my experience of the pack? So let's go back to this winter goat hunt that I just got back from, I don't know, maybe a month or 6 weeks ago now. So like I said, I was hiking in with 91 pounds, and I know a lot of you are gonna say that's absurd. Well, listen, when you're going on a deep winter hunt at minus 25 degrees Celsius or minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're gonna be in there for 8 days, and you need all your food, all your clothes, your whole camp, snowshoes, crampons, ice axes, climbing rope, and all the assorted stuff that comes with a deep winter hunt, your rifle, everything else. The weight just adds up, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. So I was hiking in with 91 pounds. I had a 6-mile hike in on the first day. I was on snowshoes. It wasn't the worst terrain, but there was lots of like little ups and downs. There was lots of really deep snow. It was a challenging hike for sure. And I only stopped twice for a little bit of food and a little bit of water each time. Normally on those winter hunts, because you're wearing kind of bulky clothing, your bag is very hard to get adjusted right because there's so many layers between you and your skin. So you have a hard time getting that tight connection with the hip belt, and everything kind of tends to drop, and you end up carrying the weight, more of the weight with your shoulders than you want to. I've done this hike before a couple times with another pack from another manufacturer. And I can say it was the most comfortable hike like that I've ever done. The pack stayed up. I think that's really where the new lumbar pad and the contouring in the hip belt shine, is that it's able, even at increased weights, and more importantly, as you warm up throughout the day. Because that's what I found. Any pack feels good for the first hour because the foam still has all of its elasticity. You're not covered in sweat. You haven't like shrunken up. You'll notice after a couple hours hiking, your waist kind of shrinks up because you dehydrate. You lose a little bit of water weight. And you'll notice your belt gets tighter the longer you're on a backcountry hunt, like your pants belt, not just your hip belt on your backpack. And so what I would notice with other packs is that in order to keep the hip belt up, I would eventually have to kind of creep the hip belt up and almost over my iliac crest. So it would actually start kind of digging in just underneath my ribs. And then I'd kind of have to cinch it down. And while it would keep the weight from sliding down my hips, it would be 3 or 4 inches higher than I really wanted it. And it would kind of get really uncomfortable. And that's when I would get home and I'd have these like little blood blister bruises right on the tips of my iliac crest, because instead of the weight wrapping around my hips, it was sitting on top of my hips and kind of cutting off the circulation right there. But with the additional contouring of the belt, the difference in the foam in the belt, and the new contouring and foam in the lumbar pad, I feel like they've really solved those issues. And it was shocking to me how well that pack would stay up throughout the course of like a pretty solid, grueling hike. Now, as far as shoulder and trap feel, it was great. One of the nice things that they've done is they've added some foam. I'm not sure if it's a different type of foam, but there's definitely more foam in the shoulder pads than there was in the past. And they already had really nice shoulder pads, shoulder straps. So you will notice that those are quite comfortable and remain comfortable throughout the day. Also for my body type, some other manufacturers, I have a really hard time getting the width right. Like I either find it's too far and it's pulling my chest open, or it's too tight and it's kind of cutting into my traps. But with the K4, they kind of land just on a really nice part. And because of the Velcro attachment system, you can cant those in and out as necessary to customize them for your own needs. Now, I already mentioned that I really like the additional bag space in the new system, but I will also say one of my favorite things about the Exo bags themselves is that they're incredibly simple, yet still functional. Like, they're not just a big chamber. They at least have those side pockets. They've moved back to having 2 zippers and a stretchy pocket on the front. So I like to refer to it as simple yet functional. It's not so simple that you don't have any options, but it's not so complicated that you have like an endless stream of zippers and straps and doodads in order to keep everything tight and compact. So simple and functional bag design. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of what Exo has become known for. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that I don't like. Number 1, I think the MOLLE webbing on the hip belts is too short. I would like it to go all the entire length of the hip belt, because, you know, sometimes I like to put that gum bearer on the same side as my hip belt pouch. And with the current configuration, I can't do that. I kind of have to choose one system or another. And I would like to have more flexibility in the placement of that hip belt, because some people are going to want to run it further back and some people are going to want to run it further forward. Now, I talked with Steve about this, and it was simply a production limitation. The cost was just too high to essentially have different form factors for all the belt sizes and different sewing processes for all the belt sizes, because that's essentially what you would have had to do. And now that there's 5 belt sizes, they kind of took the one that fit all belt sizes the best, the placement that would be most favorable for each belt, and went ahead with that. So while I would prefer to have it the other way, I can't really fault them for that either. Like, you do have to place some kind of constraints if you want to keep manufacturing costs reasonable. Up next is belt sizing. I have personally always found belt sizing somewhat frustrating with Exo. I am right on the cusp of a medium and a large. Like, if you go off of the old sizing mechanisms, I am a medium. But then when a medium shows up, it's too short. Here's my theory. I have a wide but shallow waist. So my hips are kind of far apart, but when I turn sideways, I'm kind of narrow. And so I think while, for instance, I wear a 38 pant, like my waist size is 38 in a pair of jeans, I don't actually have the same circumference as a typical man who has a 38 size waist. So it actually takes up more room, so I don't fit into a medium. Now, their new sizing methodology, they want you to measure your waist, and they're going directly off of the tape measure. It still wasn't perfect for me. I had to, even when I got my prototype, I had to swap in a belt, and they sent me a new one. Here's what I will say. I've never had a problem getting service from Exo, and if I ever needed something swapped out, it was never an issue, and they normally shipped it like ASAP, and there was no additional cost and all kinds of stuff. But I guess what I'm saying to you is that even after measuring yourself, if you feel like you're right on the borderline, I would probably go up a size, because it's rare that they're going to touch in the middle. But if you have the padding of the hip belt ending before it gets to your iliac crest, then the webbing of the hip belt, there's a lot of pressure there, and you're carrying a lot of weight of the pack right there, and it's not going to be comfortable, and you're not going to get an optimal experience from the pack. So you can see on this prototype 7200, there's one zipper coming down the front. Now that's my favorite system. I could even get away without a zipper in the front at all. I rarely use that to get stuff. I'm an in through the top guy. However, I will say being able to open up the bottom and like pull something small out is somewhat beneficial. However, in the new production models, they have gone back to a system where they run dual zippers, one on each side, and they kind of have this stretchy fabric in the middle. Now, again, I talked to Steve about this, and he said there was definitely mixed feedback about this, but the overwhelming support was to go with the old system, the dual zippers with the stretchy fabric. Most people really liked that. It's not for me because I don't put anything in that stretchy fabric. My pack is normally so full, I can't put anything else except for maybe a map in there. I prefer the simplicity and the weight savings of the one zipper. I also tend to strap a lot of stuff to the front of my bag, and I find having both those zippers and the stretchy fabric is just more stuff than I need up there. So from a personal perspective, I would have preferred they stayed with the one zipper system up the middle of the bag. The last thing that I will note is that the prototype model definitely felt clunky and boxy with light weights. I took it on a family elk hunt in September, and we were doing a ton of day hunting from like a truck camping spot. And so it was literally like a little bit of food, your kill kit, you know, an elk bugle, and that was about it. So like 10, 15 pounds in your pack. And it was moderately uncomfortable because the lumbar pad was really stiff, the shoulder straps and hip belts were really stiff. Now, it was also still a fairly new pack at that point, but one of the changes that they've made, as it's been described to me, I haven't worn the final production version yet, so I can't comment on it personally, but they've adjusted the way the foam goes in the lumbar pad, and they've done some modifications with the shoulder straps and the hip belt as well, because apparently that wasn't uncommon feedback. So they've made some adjustments, but that was one of the things. Now, I don't tend to run around with a 20-pound pack on my back, and I certainly wouldn't recommend running around with an 8,000 cubic inch pack with 20 pounds in it. But I was doing it for testing purposes. But if I'm gonna be fully transparent, I do have to add that was a little bit, it was one of the things I didn't enjoy. It just wasn't as comfortable, I felt, with light weights. But I also think this is further evidence of there is no perfect piece of gear. And if you want something that's gonna be a great expedition pack, it's probably inherently not gonna be a great day pack. Now that's one of the reasons that I went with the 5,000 for my second pack. And I think this would make a great transition because the most common question I've got since people knew I was gonna be posting this review is, can I get away with a 5,000 cubic inch pack for an X amount of days sheep hunt? And it's funny, that's exactly how the question gets asked. It's not like, what's the ideal size or how many days could I get away with X? Literally, I have a dozen different people who said, can I get away with a 5,000 on a 7 to 10 day backcountry hunt? So here's what I'm gonna say. And just to finish my other thought, that was why I got a 5,000, because I think for that 5 to 7 day kind of area for me, I would like to have a bag that's a little smaller, a little lighter, and a little more comfortable with those smaller loads. Now, if you are an advanced backcountry hunter, you have your gear list dialed, you have your food list dialed, and you don't need to take an extra amount of shit and you're not filming, I do think a guy who really knows what he's doing can get away with the 5,000 for 10 days. I don't see why not, especially with the meat shelf. I've talked to a few guys who prefer to run smaller packs, and they will put their food or something else significantly compressible in the meat shelf for like the first half of the hunt, hoping that, you know, by the time they take an animal down and they're on their way out, they'll have most of their food gone and the rest can go back in the pack. So I do feel like if you fit in that category of a borderline minimalist hunter, I think 10 days with the 5,000 is doable. I think for an average guy, the limit would probably be 7 days. As soon as you get over 7 days, I would start to recommend the 7,200. Now here's where the advice gets somewhat tricky, because I don't want the newer guys to think, well, I'll just get the bigger bag, because likely what's gonna happen is you're gonna fill it with unnecessary shit because you have the room. So I also think there's an argument to be made that by constraining yourself to the smaller pack, you're probably doing yourself a favor in the long run, because it's gonna force you to make decisions about what you really need and what you don't. But here's what I will say. If you're a guy like me and you not only do 10-day hunts, but you do 12, 14, 15-day hunts, or you do deep winter hunts where you're gonna need the same amount of gear for 8 days in February as you would for 14 in August, or you're a self-filmer, or you do a lot of solo hunting where you're not splitting up optics, you're not splitting up your sleep system, and you're carrying one of everything with you, I would recommend the 7,200, because it's still gonna compress down really tightly for the 3 to 4 day trips that you've got. But it's going to give you that added flexibility for those bigger hunts when you've got more gear. But if you tend to hunt in a group, if your hunts tend to be 4 to 8 days in length, and you know what you're doing, and you tend to pack with good sense, and you don't bring a lot of extra stuff, I think you can do a lot of hunts in the 5,000. And then finally, if you're like a bivvy elk hunt guy or a truck hunt guy, or you live in the Southwest and you tend to do really light trips and kind of drier weather, I think that 3,600 is going to be the best bang for your buck. So here's one final note I want to add, because another one of the main questions I've been getting is, should I upgrade from the K3 to the K4? Now I'm going to kind of arbitrarily put some number on this just so you can make a more data-informed decision. I'm going to go ahead and say that in my estimation, the K4 is about 20% better than the K3. So ask yourself, where are you at with the K3? Like, do you love your K3? Does it fit great? Does it function great? Does it do everything you want a pack to do? If you answer yes to all those 3 questions, I don't think the K4 is going to blow your mind. I don't think there's a real need to upgrade. But if you're one of those guys where the K3 tended to slip down on your hips a little bit, or you wish you had a slightly bigger bag, or it kind of annoyed you that there wasn't like kind of long protected side pockets, or you had to buy the upgrade to the lumbar pad and it still wasn't quite as stiff as you want. So you're like, it was a satisfactory bag, but it was just a little shy of blowing your mind. If you're in that camp, I think the 20% improvement to the K4 is likely worth the upgrade. I got to refresh myself on the pricing, but I don't think, I think the 6,400 used to be $674, and I think the 7,200 is like $699. I think they might be $25 apart. So it's not like you're going to be spending a ton more cash to get the upgrade, but I would probably use that 20% mark as a good gauge as to whether or not you want to upgrade. All right, folks, there you got it. My final thoughts on the K4. I got to give a quick shout out to my review platform, Mindful Reviews. So mindful-reviews.com. If you want to help select what products I review, if you want to help review those products, if you want to be entered into a monthly draw in order to win free prizes, or if you want the ability to buy raffle tickets for the big pieces of gear that I raffle off after the big category reviews I do, then you want to join Mindful Reviews. We're over 150 members already. There's always lots of chat on the forums in there. Super helpful, super supportive group of people. All different skill levels, all different gear knowledge levels. It's a really kind of engaging community, but the link is down below and I would really urge you to sign up. I'm working very hard at remaining unbiased and non-sponsored. I have no plans on ever entering into any financial agreements with any gear manufacturing company. And the way that I do that is through the support I receive on Mindful Reviews. So if you like reviews like this, go support that community, and in turn, you're going to have more reviews like this. Quick request, if you could please like, share, comment, subscribe, help push this video out. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps build the channel, helps build the whole Mindful Hunter ecosystem, and I really appreciate it. If you have any further questions, drop them in the comments section below, or hit me up on Instagram at mindful_hunter. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.